Flight GT778 of the country's flagship airline was marked special that day, not only because it connected the nation from the capital to the southern seaside city in a single non-stop route, but also because every seat in first class had been booked solid 3 weeks in advance, claimed by business magnates, politicians, and a few shadowy names from the investment world. Inside the quiet cabin, the air carried the scent of polished leather from the seats, laced with traces of expensive perfumes clinging to suit jackets. It was the kind of atmosphere where an ordinary person would immediately know they didn't belong. Then came the sound of small footsteps padding across the thick carpet. From the far end of the aisle, 2 black twin girls, no older than 8, walked in, each pulling a silver-gray suitcase. Neither spoke. Their wide eyes held the polite restraint of children drilled in good manners. Chloe, the elder, stepped half a pace ahead, calm and observant. Clara, her sister, with a faint birthmark beneath her left ear, clung to Chloe's hand, her steps a touch more hesitant. Both were neatly dressed, hair braided, collars pressed sharp, but no matter how polished their appearance, the color of their skin was the first thing anyone noticed. And the first to react was the chief flight attendant. Meredith Swan, white, in her 50s, cropped blonde hair, lips painted a heavy red. Her gaze was as sharp as the metal rims of her glasses. Everyone in the airline knew her, strict, feared, both an internal inspector and the wife of a board member. Quiet power in uniform. She blocked the aisle, scanning the children up and down as if inspecting contraband. Her voice came out shrill, cutting, cold as ice. "This is first class, not a playground for low-born brats. If you're lost, head back to economy." The words cracked through the air like a slap, drawing stares, some frowns, some faint smirks. Chloe stood taller, still gripping her sister's hand, and answered clearly, "We're in the right place. Our nanny has the tickets." Before Meredith could retort, a woman's voice rose from behind them. "Excuse me, here are our tickets." A middle-aged black woman stepped forward. Ruth Jennings, about 45, dressed plainly in a cream blouse and gray slacks. Her natural curls were tied back. She wore no makeup, but her eyes carried the weight of years, the steady composure of someone long used to being overlooked. She drew 3 tickets from her bag and held them out with both hands.
Wait a second.
"I'm
If
their
you like
nanny.
this video,
Their father
please
bought
like,
first
comment,
class
and
seats for all
subscribe.
3
It
of
really
us."
helps us.
Meredith glanced at the tickets as though examining counterfeits. Then she let out a sharp laugh. "What is this? The airline owner's grand entrance? Black folks with a nanny? Don't flatter yourselves." The derision rippled outward like a cue. Voices rose behind her. "What trick now? Always some game with them. Looks more like a mother and kids. Acting lessons paying off. Maybe they think they're royalty." Ruth said nothing. The girls said nothing. It was silence, not of guilt, but of those who've been insulted so many times they know protest only feeds the fire. Meredith flicked her fingers, tapped on her tablet. The data was correct. 3 first-class tickets, names matching. Her expression didn't change. "The plane's about to depart. I won't argue further. You'll be reassigned to economy. 3 seats at the back. If you refuse, I don't mind dropping cargo mid-flight." Ruth pressed her lips together. No arguing, no begging. Chloe and Clara bowed their heads, but their eyes stayed wide, following every move of the woman in uniform. Meredith lifted her chin and strode inside, leaving behind an air ripped open by the silent scorn of those who believed themselves proper passengers. And none of them realized that every word spoken, every sneer, would soon make fools of them all. Seats 1A, 1B, 1C. Their original first-class seats, printed clearly on Chloe's, Clara's, and Ruth's tickets, were now nothing more than empty characters on paper. The 3 of them had been reassigned to the very back row of economy, pressed against the restroom and galley, where the hiss of the coffee machine and the smell of reheated meals lingered like an unwanted guest. These seats weren't meant for paying passengers. They were the emergency extras, usually held for last-minute rebookings or airline staff hitching a ride. The leather was cracked, the seatbelts frayed, recline buttons jammed. No screens, no menu, no pillows, no hot towels, and certainly no one walked over to ask, "Can I get you anything?" Ruth tucked the girls' bags into the overhead bin, smoothed Clara's hair, then sat down without complaint. Chloe stared out the window. Clara leaned her cheek against Ruth's arm, her small hand gripping the fabric of her sleeve. At the front of the cabin, Meredith Swan, chief flight attendant, strode down the aisle like she owned the sky. Her eyes flicked back to the trio of black passengers she had just banished. She smirked. "If it weren't for takeoff, you'd already be off this plane," she said loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "Don't make trouble. Sit still the whole flight." Some passengers chuckled. A young white woman in a designer hoodie whispered to her friend. First-class imposters turned into baggage class. The man beside her grinned. Thought they'd get respect just by boarding. What a joke. Ruth heard every word. She didn't turn around. Chloe squeezed Clara's hand tighter, bent to whisper something in her ear. The twins quietly pulled a thin black object from their bag. Chloe adjusted the angle, tucking it into the gap beneath the seat cushion. Meredith's sharp eyes caught the movement. She narrowed her gaze. "What are you hiding now? Another stunt?" she hissed. But she walked on, leaving behind an air thick with disdain. To her they were already branded, unworthy of further attention. The plane lifted into the sky. For the next 2 hours, not a drop of water reached their row. The meal cart rolled by without slowing. When Ruth opened her mouth to ask, the tray passed her like she was invisible. One junior flight attendant, barely 25, with braided brown hair, hesitated. She started to pour water to slide a cup onto their tray. But Meredith's hand clamped her shoulder. A squeeze, just firm enough to terrify. The girl pulled back. Meredith's tiny shake of the head carried a wordless threat. "Remember who runs this flight." No one stood up for Ruth or the twins. The three of them were cut out of the flight's entire service web. Chloe sat tall, eyes fixed on the seat ahead. Clara dozed, her breath steady against Ruth's arm. Ruth closed her eyes too, but under the armrest her hand stayed locked around the device the girls had slipped into place. Some passengers glanced at them, then looked away. A man with prayer beads frowned but said nothing. Nobody wanted to catch discrimination by standing too close. Meredith finally settled into her jump seat at the front, scrolling her phone. A message from a colleague lit her screen. "Any internal checks on this flight? Someone unusual on board." She typed back, "Don't worry. Those people probably picked up tickets off the street." Then leaned back, smiling like a queen who had just swept filth from her palace. "This is a 5-star airline," she announced, voice dripping with scorn. "Not a bus station." The words rang out like nails hammered into the hierarchy she guarded. No one clapped back. No one objected. The sky outside was serene. Inside, the cabin felt like a courtroom before sentencing. Chloe shut her eyes. Clara slept again. And Ruth, silent, unbending, kept her grip on the small hidden device beneath the seat, the one holding on to truth. The plane touched down softly at 5:43 p.m. Outside, a pale mist hung in the air. No rain, but cold enough for every breath to leave a thin trace of smoke. Passengers rose, slipped on coats, grabbed their bags and folded their seats back into place with casual indifference. No one looked toward the back of the cabin. No one remembered that for 3 hours, 3 passengers had gone without a sip of water, a word of kindness, or even a decent glance. In Meredith Swan's mind, though, there was only one thought: victory. She stood, smoothed her collar, glanced in a compact mirror tucked in her crocodile leather purse, and repainted her fading crimson lips. Her eyes, sharpened by dark eyeliner, glinted with satisfaction. "Those 3 pieces of trash must have learned their place by now," she muttered, nodding at a familiar passenger, a bank director who had flirted with her at a corporate party last year. By the time she descended the aircraft stairs, Meredith lifted her chin, striding as though she had just delivered the finest performance of her career. But before she could take more than a few steps on the tarmac, a man in a black suit intercepted her. His voice was polite but edged with command. "Excuse me, Mrs. Swan. Someone needs to see you. Please come with us." She narrowed her eyes. "I just completed a flight. I don't have time for administrative nonsense. We are acting under direct orders from the executive office. Please." There was no menace in his tone, only certainty. It wasn't the deferential gaze she was used to, the kind reserved for her husband's position on the airline's board. Something in that unwavering calm unsettled her. Meredith hesitated, then gave a curt nod. They led her into a small conference room deep within the airport's administrative wing. Frosted glass muted the outside world. Inside, a bottle of water, a few open files, and a man already seated at the head of the table. He was in his 40s, black, with sharp features and eyes like polished obsidian, cold, steady, but not angry. His navy suit fit with bespoke precision, his brigade timepiece glinting beneath his cuff, his black tie pinned with gold. Everything about him, from the way his hands rested calmly on the table to the way his gaze never wandered, announced one truth. Here sat not a man proving his authority, but a man accustomed to wielding it. Meredith stepped in, voice already bristling. What now? What's with all these black people today? Everywhere I turn. Please sit, Mrs. Swan. The voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, like a gavel striking oak. Meredith froze. In an instant, she was no longer the most feared chief attendant, but just another employee summoned at security. My name is Dominic Rayford, the man said evenly. The name prickled at her memory. CEO of this airline. The words dropped like stone through ice. Her face drained. Her throat went dry. Her hands trembled faintly, though she forced her lips into a brittle smile.
Forgive me. I didn't know you were at the airport today.
Dominic gave no reply, only the faintest nod. Then he gestured. The door opened. Two black girls stepped inside. Chloe and Clara, still in their neat blue dresses, still carrying their small suitcases. But this time they walked differently. Straight-backed, certain, their eyes bright, no trace of fear. And when they spoke in unison, "Daddy," Meredith staggered, as if gravity had abandoned her. No, that's impossible." Ruth Jennings entered last, quietly closing the door behind her. The chief attendant had no words left. Her knees wobbled. Her hand clawed at the nearest chair. Dominic's palm tapped the table softly, his gaze unchanging. "What words, what actions did you use toward my children on that flight?" I don't recall exactly," Meredith stammered. "It was a misunderstanding. I was only following procedure. What regulation permits you to call children low-born trash?" Dominic's voice cut like cold steel. "I didn't. What regulation permits you to expel ticketed passengers from first class, to deny them service for the entire flight, to threaten to drop cargo mid-air?" Her breath quickened. Her words unraveled. "I didn't mean it. I just thought, I didn't know they were what?" Dominic pressed. "Who did they need to be for you to treat them decently?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Dominic snapped his fingers. A laptop clicked to life. The video played. No music, no editing, just a low angle, tilted from under a seat, but enough to capture everything. Meredith's sneering voice, her mocking words, her threats hurled like knives. Her own voice echoed. "There's such a thing as class, don't you know? I won't hesitate to drop cargo mid-air." Meredith's eyes bulged. Where did that come from?" Chloe stepped forward, calm. "I set my phone to record when you stopped us at the first-class cabin. I sent it to Dad as soon as we landed." Clara nodded. "We didn't expect to be treated that way, but Dad taught us not to stay completely silent in the face of injustice." Dominic's gaze fell back on Meredith. "Do you have anything left to explain?" She collapsed into the chair, face chalk-white, eyes darting. No words. Everything she thought she commanded, status, authority, fear, had collapsed in the lens of a silent camera. Dominic rose, unknotted his tie, and turned to his daughters. "Let's go home?" He looked to Ruth, offering a rare smile. "Thank you for your composure and your trust." Ruth bowed her head, resting a hand gently on Clara's shoulder. She said nothing, but her eyes glowed like a candle in the sterile room. Meredith Swan remained seated, no longer the queen of the cabin, just a name soon to vanish from the airline's roster. Less than 24 hours after Flight GT-778 landed, A 2-minute 19-second video appeared on social media with a simple caption. "This is how a head flight attendant treated black passengers, even though they were in the right seats with the right tickets." The clip was first shared from an anonymous account, but within 2 hours it spread like wildfire. Major news outlets quickly picked it up, blasting headlines such as "First-class passengers kicked out of their seats because of skin color," "CEO's daughters humiliated by his own airline staff." Not knowing who's who, the cost of prejudice is losing everything. Every line from the clip, Meredith Swan's sharp voice, the insults about delusions and class, was quoted, dissected, and condemned. They became undeniable proof of deep-seated bias in service culture. Meredith was fired immediately. The decision was made public the next morning, accompanied by a press release from CEO Dominic Rayford. "We do not tolerate discrimination of any kind. From this moment, Meredith Swan is no longer employed at our airline." But it didn't stop there. An internal investigation was launched. Layers of dust swept under the rug were ripped open. It turned out Meredith's advanced certification had expired 5 years earlier. She had no valid senior license. Multiple reports from junior flight attendants about her bullying, favoritism, and abuse of power had been ignored because her husband Charles Swan was on the airline's board of directors. Within a week, Charles himself was ousted. Accused of nepotism, covering up misconduct, and manipulating staff reports, he was permanently removed from the board. The Swan name, once a symbol of old guard power within the airline, was erased from all executive documents and internal records. At a press conference 3 days later, Dominic Rayford stood before hundreds of reporters. Wearing a dark navy suit, white shirt, no tie, he looked stern but composed. Behind him, a screen showed 3 empty first-class seats, 1A, 1B, 1C. "No one will ever be judged by the color of their skin," Dominic declared, each word cutting the air like steel. "No one has the right to insult my daughters or any passenger, and at least on my airline, that will never happen again." Applause erupted. But Dominic didn't stop at apologies. He announced sweeping reforms. An independent oversight unit with civil rights specialists reporting outside the airline hierarchy. New scholarships in aviation for black students, immigrants, and underrepresented communities. Mandatory retraining for all crew in communication and anti-discrimination practices, supervised by human rights organizations. A global campaign. Sky belongs to everyone. Meanwhile, the twin girls Chloe and Clara unexpectedly became beloved public figures. The press called them two little passengers with the courage of adults, the next generation symbol, standing firm without staying silent. The black girls who set a phone on a seat and lifted justice into the sky. Thousands of people sent letters, flowers, books, even early scholarship offers. Dominic declined all, keeping only what mattered most, normalcy for his daughters. Ruth, the nanny, stayed with them as always, walking them home, cooking dinner, reminding them to wear coats in the cold. But something changed. Chloe and Clara no longer saw her as the nanny. They saw her as family. One windy afternoon, Dominic took the twins to the airport, not to travel, but simply to watch planes take off. They stood by the glass wall, sunlight spilling across the floor. Chloe, straight-backed as ever, said suddenly, "Dad, one day I'll be as great as you." Dominic smiled softly. "You already are." "No," she insisted, lips pressed tight. "One day I'll be greater, so no one will ever be humiliated on our planes again." Clara nodded, whispering, "Everyone should at least be asked. Would you like anything to drink?" Ruth smiled behind them. Outside, the wind swept past the glass, carrying with it an unwritten promise, etched not on paper but across the open sky. Message: discrimination has never been about where you sit. It's about how people choose to see one another. On that flight, 3 black passengers, a nanny, and 2 little girls didn't need to shout or demand respect. They stayed silent, yet their silence itself became proof, a record that forced the guilty to bow their heads and correct their wrongs. No one has the right to judge another by skin color, profession, or outward simplicity, because you never truly know who you are insulting until that insult topples the very position you thought would last forever. Justice doesn't need noise to exist. Sometimes it takes just one steady gaze that refuses to bow, one phone quietly recording, and one belief unbroken by prejudice, and even the sky itself has to change,